My name is Thomas Green. I'm 62 years old, a retired history teacher, and for most of my life, I believed I understood sacrifice. I grew up in a blue-collar family in Michigan. My father worked in the steel mill until his lungs gave out, and my mother cleaned houses to keep food on the table. They didn't have much, but what little they had, they gave to me. When I lost my wife in my late 30s, leaving me to raise our son Daniel alone, I told myself I'd do the same, give until it hurt, until there was nothing left. Daniel was my reason. Every decision, every dollar, every late night I spent grading papers or tutoring on the side was for him. When other teachers talked about vacations in Europe, I stayed home, pinching pennies to save for Daniel's future. When he wanted to attend a private high school for better opportunities, I sold my father's land that had been in the family for generations, just to cover the tuition. When he said he wanted to be a doctor, I co-signed loans, dipped into my retirement fund, and told myself it would all be worth it when I saw him standing in a white coat, proud, successful, everything I never had the chance to be. For years, I believed that love, sacrifice, and silence were the same thing. You didn't complain about what you gave. You just gave. But all of that changed with one letter. It was a Saturday morning in late March when I found it. I had stopped by Daniel's apartment in Ann Arbor to drop off a box of things he'd left behind at the house. Old yearbooks, some framed photos of his mother, little keepsakes that I thought might comfort him in stressful times. He wasn't home, but he'd given me the spare key long ago, so I let myself in. On the kitchen table sat an envelope. My name wasn't on it. Instead, it was addressed to Aunt Linda, Daniel's late mother's sister. I wouldn't have touched it, but the flap was open, and the paper inside was sticking out, just enough that a single sentence caught my eye. Daniel's father won't be attending the engagement party. It's easier this way. I froze, fingers hovering above the page. I told myself to leave it alone, that this was none of my business. But something inside me cracked open, and before I knew it, I was sliding the letter free. It wasn't long. A single page, handwritten in the neat script of Daniel's fiancée, Claire. She explained how her family was planning an extravagant engagement party in Boston, how everything had to be just right to make the proper impression. Daniel, she wrote, felt embarrassed by me. My small-town manners, my outdated clothes, my quiet, unpolished way of speaking. He doesn't want his colleagues or my family to see that side of him, she added. It'll be easier if we say he's unwell. Honestly, it's better if his dad just stays out of the picture. I read those words 3 times, maybe 4. My chest felt hollow, as if someone had scooped the air right out of me. My hands didn't tremble. I didn't cry. But something fundamental shifted. I folded the letter carefully, slid it back into the envelope, and set it exactly where I'd found it. Then I picked up the box of yearbooks, walked back to my car, and drove home in silence. That night, I sat at my kitchen table with a mug of coffee gone cold, staring out at the darkened yard. The memories began to come, memories I hadn't asked for, memories that felt like ghosts. The time I drove 12 hours straight through the night to pick Daniel up from college after his car broke down, arriving with sandwiches and a thermos of coffee so he wouldn't have to wait alone in the dark. The time I worked weekends at the library to pay for his summer biology program in Chicago. The Christmas when I skipped buying myself a winter coat so I could surprise him with the guitar he'd wanted since middle school. All of it. Every sacrifice. Every compromise. And for what? To be erased, reduced to a footnote in my own son's story? I thought about calling him. About demanding an explanation. But the truth was, I didn't need one. The letter had told me everything I needed to know. Instead, I made myself a promise I wouldn't scream. I wouldn't beg. I wouldn't fight to keep my place in a life that no longer wanted me. I would do something quieter. Stronger. Something that would remind Daniel that the man he was so eager to erase had built the very foundation he stood on. The next morning, I woke early, made myself eggs and toast, and drove into town. Not to the grocery store, not to the library where I sometimes volunteered, but to the bank. First Federal. A squat brick building I'd been walking into for nearly 40 years. The manager, Mr. Lawson, greeted me by name, as he always did. "What can I do for you today, Mr. Green?" he asked, smiling warmly. I set my checkbook on his desk. My voice was calm, almost too calm. "I need to remove myself as guarantor on my son's condo loan." Lawson blinked, taken aback. Are you sure? That's a significant change. I'm sure, I said. He hesitated. There may be consequences, Thomas. Without your signature backing the loan, the bank could call it. He might lose the property. I met his gaze steadily. Then he'll lose it. Lawson studied me for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Very well. I signed the papers, left the bank, and drove home with the windows down, the cool March air filling the cab of my truck. By the time I pulled into my driveway, my phone was buzzing. Daniel. Over and over. I didn't answer. That evening, I poured myself a glass of whiskey, sat on the porch as the sun dipped behind the trees, and listened to the silence. For the first time in my life, I felt something I couldn't quite name. It wasn't joy. It wasn't anger. It was freedom. And deep down, I knew this was only the beginning. By Monday morning, the calls had multiplied. 23 missed, a dozen voicemails, and nearly as many texts. Daniel's name lit up my phone like a fire alarm, but I didn't answer. I spent the morning tending to the yard instead, raking the last of the dead leaves, trimming branches that had sagged under winter snow, washing the bird feeder with warm soapy water. Small things, quiet things. The kind of work that kept my hands busy while my mind wandered. Around noon, I finally sat on the porch steps with a sandwich and listened to one of the voicemails. Dad, it's me. You have to call me back. Something's wrong with the condo paperwork. They're saying the guarantor is gone. Did you do something? Please call me. This isn't funny. The next message was sharper, clipped. Dad. I know you're there. The bank says you pulled out. What the hell? Do you understand what this means? Claire's parents are furious. They said this makes me look irresponsible. I can't believe you'd sabotage me like this. Call me back. I deleted the message, set the phone face down on the step, and let the spring breeze wash over me. By evening, he showed up in person. I saw his car before I heard it, a sleek black sedan I had helped him put a down payment on during his first year of residency. He parked crookedly in the drive, stormed up the walkway, and pounded on the door before I could even stand. Dad. Open the damn door. I pulled it open slowly. He looked wild, tie loose, hair unkempt, eyes bloodshot. His voice cracked as he spoke. Why did you do it? I didn't answer right away. Instead, I stepped aside. Come in. He entered like a storm, pacing the living room, hands flying. Do you have any idea what you've done? The loan is collapsing. I'll lose the condo. Claire's parents think I'm some kind of freeloader. They're saying maybe the wedding should be postponed. Do you understand how humiliating this is? I sat in my old recliner, hands resting on my knees, calm as stone. I understand. He stopped pacing, glared at me. Then why? Why would you pull something like this? I met his eyes, steady. Because you wanted me out of the picture. So I stepped aside. His mouth opened, then closed again. He looked almost like a boy, caught off guard, searching for words. That's not what I meant. I raised an eyebrow. I read the letter, Daniel. Claire's words. But I heard your voice in them too. You didn't want me there. You thought I embarrassed you. So I made myself small. Invisible. Exactly as you wanted. He flushed, defensive. It wasn't like that. You don't understand. Claire's family, they're different. They have expectations. It's complicated. I leaned forward slightly. No. It's simple. You asked me to disappear. I listened. The silence between us stretched until it felt like a rope pulled taut. Finally, he burst. You're ruining everything. This isn't just about me. It's about Claire, her parents, the wedding, the future. How could you be so selfish? I let the word hang in the air. Selfish. After decades of working extra shifts, selling my inheritance, draining my retirement, all for him. Selfish. I stood slowly, letting the weight of my years settle into the movement. Get out, Daniel. He blinked. What? You heard me. Get out. His voice rose. You can't be serious. I've never been more serious, I said softly. You came into my home, demanded explanations, through accusations. I owe you nothing now. Not money. Not shelter. Not even my presence. Leave. For a moment, he looked like he might fight me. But then something in my eyes must have told him the battle was already lost. He grabbed his coat from the back of a chair, muttered a curse under his breath, and slammed the door on his way out. The house fell silent again. I sank back into the recliner, heart pounding but steady. I wasn't angry. Not anymore. What I felt was closer to relief, like I'd put down a weight I'd been carrying for far too long. Over the next week, the fallout spread like cracks in ice. Claire called once, her voice tight and brittle. "Mr. Green, I think there's been a misunderstanding. Daniel told me what happened, and I'm sure we can resolve this if you'll just reconsider." "I'm not reconsidering," I said calmly. Her tone sharpened. "Do you realize how much damage this is causing? My parents are questioning the entire marriage. They think Daniel is reckless. They're threatening to cut off support." "That sounds like your problem," I replied. "Not mine." There was a pause, then a cold, clipped response. "You're making a mistake." And then she hung up. 4 years, I had been the man who always said yes. Who picked up the phone, who wrote the checks, who showed up at the airport or the mechanic or the hospital at the drop of a hat. But now my silence was louder than any yes I had ever given. The texts kept coming. Daniel's words grew desperate. "Dad, please. I can't lose this condo. It's my life. It's everything I've worked for. They're all saying this proves you don't care about me. That you're bitter. I need you. Don't do this to me." Each message felt like a tug on an old wound, but I didn't answer. One night, close to midnight, I sat outside under the stars with a glass of bourbon. The air was cool, the kind that smelled faintly of damp earth and budding leaves. I thought about my father, the man who had worked himself to death so I could go to college. I thought about my wife, gone too soon, who used to remind me to save a little for myself, to stop pouring everything into Daniel. And I thought about the man I had been, the giver, the rescuer, the silent shadow behind my son's life. That man was gone. By the second week, the consequences were undeniable. The bank officially called the loan. Daniel received notice that unless he found another guarantor, or paid the balance outright, the condo would be repossessed. His colleagues whispered. Claire's family sneered. The engagement party was postponed indefinitely. The cracks widened. And for once, I didn't try to patch them. Because sometimes the only way for a child to learn is to let the walls fall. By the end of April, the whispers had turned into storms. Daniel's condo was officially under review for repossession. Claire's family had withdrawn their financial support for the wedding, citing Daniel's instability as proof he wasn't ready to join their ranks. And the engagement party, months in the making, with invitations already mailed, was quietly cancelled. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel the urge to rush in and fix it. I sat back, watching it unfold like a historian observing a battle from a safe hilltop. The moves, the counter-moves, the desperation, it was all predictable. And yet, I knew they weren't done with me. The call came one Thursday afternoon while I was in the garden, kneeling in the dirt to tuck new tomato seedlings into the soil. The voice on the other end wasn't Daniel's. "Mr. Green, this is Charles Whitman. I'm Claire's father." His tone was smooth, controlled, but there was steel beneath it. The kind of voice that had probably closed dozens of business deals, crushed rivals, and bent people to his will. "Yes," I said simply. "I think we should meet. Man to man. There seems to be some confusion about your role in Daniel's future. I'd like to clear that up." I brushed soil from my hands. "And if I don't want to meet?" A pause. Then, more firmly, "It would be in everyone's best interest if you did." I almost laughed. The arrogance was familiar, the assumption that money and power could solve everything. But I agreed to the meeting, not because I was intimidated, but because I wanted to see exactly how far they'd go. We met at a restaurant in downtown Ann Arbor, one of those sleek places with white tablecloths, soft lighting, and wine glasses so thin they looked like they'd shatter if you breathed on them. Charles Whitman arrived in a tailored navy suit, his wife in pearls at his side. Claire trailed behind them, her expression caught somewhere between embarrassment and defiance. Daniel came last, looking worn down, his eyes darting nervously as if he'd already rehearsed the lecture I was about to receive. We sat. The waiter poured water. No one ordered food. Charles leaned forward, lacing his fingers together. "Thomas, may I call you Thomas?" "You may." "Good." "Thomas, I'll be frank. This situation with the condo has put Daniel in a very difficult position. And, by extension, it's put Claire and our family in a difficult position. We have certain standards, certain expectations. You understand." I met his gaze calmly. "I understand that you don't want your daughter marrying someone who looks irresponsible." He gave a tight smile. "Exactly. Which is why I'm here. I'd like you to reinstate your guarantee on Daniel's loan. We'll make sure the payments are covered. You won't be burdened financially. It will just smooth things over. Restore appearances." I sipped my water, letting the silence stretch. "Appearances." "Yes," he said. "Appearances matter. Especially in our circles. Surely you don't want your son to look like a failure." I set the glass down gently. "Tell me something, Mr. Whitman. Did Daniel tell you why I pulled out?" A flicker of irritation crossed his face. "He said you were upset. Misunderstandings happen. Family drama. But surely you won't let emotions dictate financial decisions." I leaned back in my chair. "It wasn't a misunderstanding. I read Claire's letter. The one to Aunt Linda. The one where she said I was an embarrassment. That it would be easier if I stayed out of the picture." Claire's face went pale. Daniel shifted uncomfortably. Charles blinked once, then recovered with a politician's speed. "Well, perhaps the wording was unfortunate. But surely you're not going to sabotage your own son's future over hurt feelings." Hurt feelings. The phrase rolled around in my head like a bitter joke. Decades of sacrifice, erased with 2 words. I smiled faintly. "This isn't about feelings. It's about respect. You don't get to erase me when it's convenient, then drag me back in when you need my name on a piece of paper." Charles's tone hardened. "Be reasonable, Thomas. You're making this unnecessarily difficult." "No," I said softly. "I'm making it very simple. I won't sign. Daniel will stand or fall on his own. That's how life works." The silence at the table was heavy. Finally, Daniel burst. "Dad, please. You don't understand what this means. If I lose the condo, if Claire's parents cut me off, I'll look like a failure. Everything I've worked for, it'll be gone." I looked at him, really looked at him, the expensive suit, the watch I couldn't afford, the fear in his eyes that had nothing to do with love and everything to do with appearances. "You won't look like a failure because of me," I said quietly. "You'll look like a failure because you tried to build a life on someone else's sacrifices, and you never learned how to stand without them." Claire's mother gasped softly. Charles's jaw tightened. Claire stared at the tablecloth, cheeks flushed. I stood, laying a few bills on the table for the untouched water. "Enjoy your lunch." And then I walked out. The calls after that meeting were different. Less anger, more desperation. Daniel's messages grew frantic. "Dad, please, they're serious about canceling everything. Claire's parents won't even return my calls. I don't know what to do. You're punishing me for one mistake. I'm your son. Don't I deserve another chance?" The guilt they tried to weave into their words might have worked once. But not now. I'd lived too many years bending, folding, twisting myself to fit someone else's idea of what I should be. Now, I was done bending. A week later, I received a thin envelope in the mail. Inside was a formal notice. Foreclosure proceedings had begun on Daniel's condo. I held the paper for a long moment, then set it aside and returned to my garden. The tomatoes were beginning to sprout. The first real sign that everything was unraveling came on a Tuesday morning in May. I was sitting on the porch with my coffee when a moving truck pulled up outside Daniel's condo across town. I didn't go there myself, I didn't need to, but the news spread quickly. Word traveled through neighbors, old friends who still lived in the area, and even a few colleagues who texted me with surprise. "They're moving out already," one message read. "I thought that place was supposed to be their dream home." Dreams don't survive on sand. By the end of the week, the condo was emptied. Furniture sold off cheap. Claire's designer clothes stuffed into boxes. I heard through the grapevine that the bank had repossessed the property officially. Daniel hadn't found another guarantor. Claire's family had cut off financial support completely. And the wedding, quietly cancelled. No announcements, no explanations. Just silence. Daniel's life, once built on appearances, had collapsed in the most public way possible. And there was nothing I had to do but step aside and let gravity take care of the rest. Still, the storm came knocking one last time. It was late evening when Daniel showed up at my house again. This time, there was no sleek sedan. He arrived in an old borrowed car, dented on one side, headlights fogged with age. When he stepped onto the porch, he looked smaller somehow. Not physically, he was still taller than me, but diminished. Deflated. I opened the door before he knocked. Daniel. His eyes were rimmed red. His suit was wrinkled. He smelled faintly of whiskey. For a long moment, he didn't speak. Then, finally, "Dad, I lost everything." I gestured toward the living room. "Come in." He sat heavily on the couch, elbows on his knees, face buried in his hands. His words came in a rush, tumbling over each other. "Claire's gone. She said she can't marry someone without stability. Her parents won't even let me in the house. My condo's gone, my reputation at the hospital shot. People whisper behind my back. They say I'm reckless, that I can't manage my own life." His voice cracked. "They're not wrong, are they?" For years, I had imagined conversations with my son like this, raw, vulnerable, honest. But never under these circumstances. I sat across from him, folding my hands. "Daniel, I gave you everything I could. My time, my money, my sacrifices. I thought if I gave enough, you'd find your own footing. But instead, you learned to lean harder. And when I finally stepped aside, you fell." His eyes filled with tears. "So that's it. You're just going to watch me drown." I shook my head slowly. "No. I already threw you the lifeline 1,000 times. You cut it yourself. Now you have to learn to swim." He stared at me, searching my face for some sign of weakness, some hint that I'd cave like I always had. But I didn't. The silence stretched. Finally, he wiped his eyes with the back of his hand and muttered, "I don't know how." And for the first time in years, I felt something shift between us. Not pity. Not anger. Something closer to clarity. "You'll figure it out," I said softly. "Because you'll have to. That's how men grow." He left not long after, shoulders slumped, movements heavy. I didn't offer him money. I didn't promise help. I only watched him walk down the path, a man finally facing the weight of his own choices. In the days that followed, I heard pieces of his story filter back. He'd moved into a small rental on the edge of town. Nothing fancy, just enough to keep a roof over his head. He was working longer shifts at the hospital, quieter, humbler, less eager to flash the watch or the car he no longer had. Claire. She vanished from the picture entirely. The last I heard, she was back in Chicago, attending events with her parents, as if Daniel had been just another project that failed to meet her family standards. And me? I returned to my quiet routines. Gardening. Reading. Taking long walks in the evening. The house, once filled with noise and need, was finally still. One night, I sat on the porch again, bourbon in hand, the air cool against my skin. I thought about all the years I'd spent bending myself to fit into someone else's life. All the years I'd been told I was embarrassing, inconvenient, unnecessary. But the truth was clear now. I hadn't lost a son. I had reclaimed myself. And in the stillness of that spring evening, as the crickets hummed and the stars blinked awake overhead, I realized that revenge hadn't required rage or cruelty. All it had taken was silence. And silence had spoken louder than anything else I could have done. If this story resonated with you, share it, comment below, and don't forget to like and subscribe. Sometimes the strongest kind of love is the one you finally give to yourself.